Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Being
Wait,
Black.
Tina, wait. You want more people to get on?
Oh,
All right.
Is it live? I don't see it.
We are. And what we're doing is we're looking like we're going to have a good evening this evening discussing some being black and blue with our South Florida chapter of Noble as we share some information with individuals out there that from a perspective of what it's like being black and blue in law enforcement. Looking forward to having this conversation, have some individuals on here with some law enforcement experience. It ranges because our experiences are a little different. Everybody has a different experience, and we're just going to share some experiences with you all, get some feedback from you all, and see can't we have some good dialogue to move everything forward. Tina, are you ready to go ahead and kick us off?
Just one question. I'm sorry. Is this live on Facebook? Because I'm still not seeing it in order to share it with
Yes,
Noble.
it should be.
yeah, I'm on Noble page now.
Tina, do you see it?
No.
No, it's not live on Facebook.
It should be. Okay, let me see what we have here. We should be live.
I'll let you know when I see it.
Okay.
So you just went live?
It should be there.
I'm not seeing it still. Can you guys check also?
I'm checking, it's not there.
Yeah, it's saying that we are.
On your personal Facebook? On your Dr. Salter's Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
Someone text me and said it's live.
I'm sorry?
They see us. It's live.
Okay, well, let's go. It's just not on. It's not on Noble's Facebook. I'm not able to share it. That's the thing.
Okay, so Tina, if those individuals text you, can they share it to you and you can share it with Selena?
Yes. All right, everyone. So welcome to our Being Black and Blue that the Noble South Florida chapter is hosting this evening. For those of you that are not familiar with Noble, that is the national organization of Black law enforcement executives. You don't actually have to be in law enforcement, but these are friends, supporters, current and former law enforcement members. So on today's forum, we have Madam President Stephanie Daniels. She is an assistant director with the Miami-Dade Police Department, where she's worked for 28 years, and she's the president of the Noble South Florida chapter. We also have Selena Hightower, who is the vice president of Noble, who has been a lieutenant with the Hollywood Police Department for 22 years. Also on the call, we have Lonnie Lawrence, who is retired, and he worked over 30 plus years in law enforcement with Miami-Dade Corrections and Miami-Dade Police Department. He is the historian for the South Florida chapter. And our facilitator for this evening will be Dr. Gregory Salters, who is a major with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. The reason we're having this forum this evening is because of all of the issues and circumstances surrounding the George Floyd death. The tragic death of George Floyd and other highly publicized killings of unarmed African Americans has continued to grapple the United States. This has prompted large-scale social turmoil and protests all across the country. As we all know, systemic racism exists in every aspect of our country and also within the criminal justice system. As tensions have boiled over between the community and law enforcement, Black officers have been trying to navigate a divided country. As a result, we've decided to have this forum so that our members can engage in a conversation about their conflicts and emotions during this difficult time of being a Black officer in law enforcement. Our facilitator is Dr. Gregory Salters, who currently serves as a major with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, where he's worked for over 27 years. He earned his bachelor's degree from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, his master's degree in public administration from FAU, and his doctorate degree in adult education, human resource development from Florida International University. His dissertation explored the impact of racial profiling on Black males seeking jobs in law enforcement and committing to law enforcement careers. Dr. Salter's training has included the following: the Center for Advanced Criminal Justice Studies, Executive Leadership Program, the Police Executive Research Forums, the Senior Management Institute for Police, and the FBI National Police Academy. In addition to his responsibilities at the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, Dr. Salters has facilitated courses for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Leadership Academy. He has also served as an adjunct professor at the Broward County Institute for Public Safety, Florida International University, and the Miami-Dade College School of Justice. Dr. Salters has also facilitated FDLE's Minority Recruitment and Retention Forum, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People School to Prison Pipeline at Florida Atlantic University, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Race and Law Enforcement course at the Miami Field Office. Additionally, Dr. Salters is quite active in his community. For the past 3 years, he has served as the chairman of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Zeta Alpha Lambda's chapters, Men of Tomorrow mentoring program. And in 2014, he was recognized as Zeta Alpha Lambda's Brother of the Year. He was also recognized as Broward County School Board's Mentor of the Year for the 2014 and 2015 school year. So with no further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Dr. Salters, who will be facilitating this night's program.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tina, for that outstanding intro of me. I am looking forward to having a discussion this evening with you all so that we can kind of share with individuals the uniqueness of being Black and blue in this world and in law enforcement. A lot of times people wonder, is it really different being Black and blue? And I believe it is. When you've looked out there, it's kind of interesting when I've seen it, you all may have seen it, where the FOP president up in New York was talking about, you can't believe it, society is treating us all like animals, they do this, they don't respect us. And he had all the law enforcement officers behind them and saying that they're having to watch everywhere they go. And sometimes some of them are not even driving their police cars going home. And every time they put on their uniforms, they feel tense. When I saw that, I said, welcome to our world. But we don't have the luxury of taking off our Blackness or our brownness when we go home or when we're going out into the world. So now I believe a lot of other brothers and sisters in law enforcement are beginning to see some of the stressors that we see and feel. And when we're talking about these things tonight, we're going to be talking about it from a few different standpoints. What it was like, why did we get into law enforcement? So we got it before we were in law enforcement, or during our process getting into law enforcement, and once we've been in law enforcement careers. And we encourage individuals that are listening to us to type into their comments things that they would like to address. Perhaps they are in law enforcement, perhaps they have loved ones in law enforcement, perhaps they're seeking to be in law enforcement. Let's have a discussion of what it really means, because how many times have we been in law enforcement situations and law enforcement, being blue, says we're too Black to be blue, so we aren't really included in the table of some of the discussions and policies and what we're doing in the community. And then when we go in the community is like, yeah, you Black, but you one of them. So are we too blue to be Black in the community? So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And one of the things I'd like to start off with is when I look over here, Miss Lonnie Lawrence, who has years of experience. He's just been in a film about some of the things that were happening. And Ms. Lawrence, if you would you briefly talk to us, tell us a little bit about your career and the uniqueness that you had in your career dealing with the McDuffie incident, which happened in Miami, which also sparked some riots and things like that, so that we can see exactly what was it like being Black and blue and your unique connection to that particular incident. If you can just unmute your mic there, Mr. Lawrence. Okay, Ms. Lawrence, you see the unmute there on your mic? Okay. As he navigates his unmute on his microphone, some of the others that I know have some interesting studies and some things that have happened to them as an officer. Director, could you tell us some of the things? I know you and I were briefly speaking, and you were talking about some things that have happened during your law enforcement career, because you've had a stellar career in being a Black female and rising to the level that you have there with Miami-Dade as an assistant director. That is definitely an accomplishment. So I'm sure there's some things that you could share with us about being Black and blue. Please talk to us.
Well, one thing I can remember in being in law enforcement for over 28 years and then coming on the department as a young African-American female back in the early 90s, I've been called girl. I've been called militant. For some reason, when Black females in particular that they see as have a strong mind and strong will, when they stand up for themselves, we're ostracized or called militant. So I've had issues in my career where I've had it hard when it comes to want to go to training or want to be put in for other assignments. You know, I had to struggle with that, but I persevered. I was at a district, Intracoastal district in particular, where it was really hard for Blacks back in the early 90s and back in the 80s. So it was hard.
How would your uniqueness, because some that aren't Black would be like, I went through the same things. How was yours unique because due to you being Black?
I'm going to say uniqueness is because I felt as though white Americans or white officers at the time felt as though Blacks or women shouldn't be in law enforcement. I don't think there's nothing too unique about it other than I just wanted to be given the same opportunity as everyone else. They attempt to make it hard for me. I struggled somewhat. However, like I said, I persevered and I was able to continue.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And Selena, I know that you've been in law enforcement, and you're the first Black female sergeant, first Black female lieutenant, if I'm not mistaken, at Hollywood Police Department. Am I correct? You're on mute. Can you unmute your mic, Selena?
Yes, that's correct. I am the first Black female sergeant and lieutenant for Hollywood Police Department. Okay,
tell us a little bit about your careers and something that you'd like to share with us about being uniquely Black and how that's really impacted you.
Well, I would say that I found my journey was going to be difficult from the very beginning. My law enforcement career started as a community service officer in 1994 with Hollandale Beach Police Department. And I was a community service officer there for 4 years. Had experience, had been named Civilian of the Year. And when I decided to take that step into actually become a police officer, I found it to be hard. I had applied for nearly 15 to 20 police departments from Palm Beach County to Broward County, all the way down to Miami-Dade County. And even with my experience as a community service officer, I received much rejection. It wasn't until Hollywood Police Department picked me up as a police recruit, and I ended up being hired in 1998, went to the police academy, and I got a wake-up call. My second week in the police academy, mind you, I had been appointed as or selected by my peers as the vice president for my class.
Okay.
The second week of being in the police academy, we had an instructor that came to the class, And out of my class of about 30 recruits, I was the only Black female in the class. The class was majority white men. And so this particular advisor had singled me out when he saw me, asking me, how did I make it? How did I make it to the police academy? I was taken back, I was embarrassed, and I was upset. So that was my wake-up call to what I would find to be a challenging career as a Black female officer in law enforcement.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And I believe I have Mr. Liney now. We have him on the audio. We make things happen. One of the things that we look at, Mr. Liney, please talk to us now about your experience of being in law enforcement and your unique connection to the McDuffie incident in Miami.
Well, I can tell you that my career was very interesting, and obviously the connection in McDuffie and I, we had grown up together, went to high school together. We went into the Marine Corps together. Well, actually, we were in the Marine Corps together. We didn't actually join together, but we were there together and knew each other very well. So it was a shock when I was sitting in my office and the young lady came from Internal Affairs, came over and told me that who had been killed, our officers, in after a chase. But you know, I guess my it came on the heels of us going through things with the department anyway, because we had just sued the department for discrimination in terms of hiring and promotions and assignments. So all that wrapped up into a very difficult time on the department.
And now, Lonnie, when you talk about this, some individuals may be unaware of what the McDuffie incident was. Some of them may be new to law enforcement. You know how a lot of times we really don't discuss our histories. But if I'm not mistaken, if you could tell us a little bit about the McDuffie incident, what it was and what happened in the city of Miami afterwards, to put this in context for us.
Actually, the incident itself occurred in December. I think it's like December 27th or something like that of 1979. McDuffie, according to the officers, popped a wheelie through a light. They chased him, and as he, according to them, as he tried to get on the expressway at Northwest 2nd Avenue and Miami Avenue and 38th Street, according to them, he lost control of his bike, his motorcycle. But based on the medical examiner and all the evidence at the scene, it showed that he had not lost control of his bike. His bike was actually laid down. He was actually given up, and they basically beat him to death. And that's based on even the medical examiner said he died of blunt trauma. And the trial, which was of the 5 officers, all white, Hispanic. There were, I think it was 1 or 2 Hispanics involved. But the trial was moved from here to Tampa. And they ended up with an all-white jury of white males. And they found all of them not guilty of all charges. And of course, with that happening, Miami was already ripe for an explosion, if you will, because there were several other incidents that occurred during the same time. We had the Lozano, and there were a couple other incidents that occurred. So the city went up in flames. I mean, it was spontaneous.
Okay.
That city went up in flames.
Now, what was it like being a black officer at that particular time dealing with those particular issues?
Well, it was very difficult because at that time I was in charge of public affairs, which included PIO, Public Information Office, and I was responsible for making the initial statement for the department on behalf of the department about the incident, which was very, very, very difficult. And there were some difficult times because you got to say something, and you don't want to allow your emotions to get in the way of what you had to do. But I can tell you that there were a couple of them knew what my emotions were because I told them. I didn't hold it back from them, but I tried to hold it back from standing in front of the cameras and talking about what did or did not happen.
Okay. And what I find most interesting about your story, Mr. Lonnie, is that your relationship with McDuffie, then also what was expected of you from your officers. And one of the things that we really don't talk about is how was the tension within the station between the black officers and the white officers? Were you all treated the same? Was it different? How were you all felt to be treated that time?
Well, like I was saying earlier, we always felt that we weren't being treated fairly anyway because we were being denied promotions, assignments. You know, they were quick to assign us to public affairs or community relations, or the other place they would assign you to was narcotics. They would assign you to they'd be glad to put you in narcotics, but very few people. We didn't have anybody in auto theft, homicide. Those positions were reserved for them, if you will. And
and you say that was in 1979, right?
1979.
Okay.
You know, like I say, the consent decree, I believe, was assigned in 72.
Okay.
So things were beginning to change, but all this was a buildup.
Okay.
All this was a buildup.
Now, this is the thing that I'd like for us to think about. Ms. Lonnie was talking about these things happening in 1979, and those of us that were hearing police reform, you're hearing defunding of police, talking about reallocation of funding. If you have noticed, the areas in which Mr. Lonnie was discussing that blacks were assigned back then are now the areas where we're needing to have individuals. Talking about your community-oriented policing, and let's look at all of our agencies now. What percentage of blacks are in which units? And when you look at the percentage of blacks and which units they're in, look at your command staff and see which areas they came from. And many times in career development, they say, look where your chief is from, look where your assistant chiefs are from. You begin to career path and go in those units to seek promotions. But as you look at most of our agencies, is that what's happening within your agency? Or what are the darkest or blackest agents or blackest departments within your agency? What are we doing to move forward? And there's a story that Mr. Lonnie is saying now. Is it true in our agencies now? Let me do this, and we definitely can come back to some. I saw one question that someone had posted over here. I think it was Bernard Beckostein. Says, it still blows my mind that in the 21st century, there are so many agencies in Florida that are just now seeing African Americans in leadership roles. Definitely raised an eyebrow when he moved here from Detroit. He was a police officer up in Detroit. You begin to look at that. And also, when we begin to look at things, we have to look at them critically, because what is it that we as individuals that are black that are dealing with in law enforcement? For instance, those that are unaware of it, in Broward County, Florida, to submit an application for a police officer job, you must pass a swim test. And they say that is because officer safety issues, they want us to be prepared if we fall into water to help someone due to the large amount of water here in South Florida. However, there is no swim test to be a police officer in Dade County or Palm Beach County. So therefore, you find the only differences between police and corrections is the swim test. And there isn't a follow-up exam on it. It isn't taught in the police academy, but the way that it is talked about, this when we talk about systemic issues. They talk about once you learn how to swim, you don't forget how to swim, and we need to save ourselves. So therefore, systemically, it seems like it fits, but there's a disparate impact on those of us that had to learn how to swim, or some of us that could not, that are no longer able to serve law enforcement in Broward County. Another one, Atina, you've been in law enforcement. I had the pleasure of teaching you when you were in the police academy. Talk to me about some of your experiences.
Well, much like what President Daniels has said and Vice President Hightower has said, is that when you are a Black woman and you are vocal about who you are, your identity, and what you believe in, people are not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable with you being authentic and giving your opinion. And everyone who doesn't look like you, or maybe some people that do look like you, can take that very personal. When you become a law enforcement officer, and especially when you're Black, generally speaking, you come from a place where if you see disparate treatment or you see treatment that's not equitable, you are more apt to say, this doesn't look right. But other people may turn a blind eye to that, and that can put a target on your back. And so at some point in your career, you have to make a decision. Do you want to excel, or do you want to do what's right? And sometimes the two don't go together. I've had many situations in my career where others have engaged in nefarious conduct, criminal conduct, and those folks don't look like you. You see that they get promoted. You see that they get a different treatment than you. But, as a Black officer, if you do the most minuscule thing, they will take it and run with it. And you have to understand that Black law enforcement officers only make up roughly 12% of all cops. When you talk about Black women, that's like 5%. Black women in leadership positions, it's about 1%. So 1% of all of the cops in the entire United States of America are Black women in leadership positions. That is very challenging for people to wrap their head around, because they don't want to believe that you are competent and capable enough to lead a force, a division, make the right decision, and everyone stays safe. And unfortunately, the history of law enforcement is slavery. We all know that. And most people want to turn a blind eye to that, but it's the truth. And if you want to move forward, you have to have progressive conversations about what do we do differently. I want to share with you something that happened in the city of Lauderdale. So our Lauderdale's union president, Mustafa Malik, apparently there was a city hall meeting, and during the meeting, one of the commissioners made some comments about police reform and police brutality related to some of the things taking place in law enforcement, which is to be expected, because if you are a human being, you should be concerned with what's taking place. It's not really a Black issue. It's not a white issue. It's a human rights issue. And especially for a person in a position of power, you should use your platform for good. And this particular individual wanted to send a message to the membership. And the message to membership, and I read this because it goes to show the mindset. Brothers and sisters, as some of you may know, Commissioner Campbell made some comments regarding police reform and police brutality in the last commission meeting. During that meeting, he was not specific as to who he was talking about. However, I took a moment to speak at that meeting to let him and everyone listening know that Lauderdale has been doing a fantastic job over the last 26 years and have only had a total of 6 sustained use of force complaints And that although there may be problems throughout the country, those issues do not exist for the Lauderdale Police Department. The fact that union presidents around the country, just because a use of force is sustained, doesn't mean that the ones that came before it were not proper use of force complaints. What we do know is that people that work in capacities of internal affairs and all of those oversight committees, generally speaking, they are very hesitant to rule against police officers. So just because you have a not sustained complaint doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean that your agency is excelling. It just means that that's the decision that that particular individual made. And that's a part of the problem. They don't believe Black supervisors. They don't believe Black people when they say that they're being mistreated by police. And it's always been this us versus them. So my takeaway is that it's very difficult when you're Black in law enforcement. It's even more difficult when you do have a voice and you use it.
Okay.
And everybody in a position of power, whether you're a supervisor or not, you should do the right things for the right reasons. And we have too little of that.
Outstanding, outstanding. So some of the stuff that we're looking at is that when we are, I appreciate you sharing that and being as transparent regarding that particular issue, because a lot of times we have instances and we're talking generalities and we need to be specific. And a lot of times for us to move forward, we have to have open and frank discussions with individuals that are genuinely concerned about moving things forward. But so many times we can get into the sensitive conversations and you find out that some people are listening to respond instead of listening to understand. And sometimes they'll give you a seat at the table to say you were sitting at the table, but don't want to hear what you have to say. Looking at some of the things that we have here in our comments, we're looking at someone talk about police executives not having these conversations. We're going to have that. And then I saw a comment from Dr. Rick Holton, who's one of the law enforcement guys, and he has retired, and he was with the Metro Dade, retired there, I believe, as a lieutenant. He says, as a young officer not knowing if law enforcement was my true path of success, I pulled up on a white male beating on a young Black male. I jumped out of my vehicle to intervene, transported the young man to the office, then later met with the officer to say to him directly and forcibly that if I ever observed that action again, then he would have to beat him, and he didn't want that. But it was just people like Mr. Lonnie Lawrence, Bobby Spicer, and others who kept me from leaving the profession and making him the outstanding individual that he was. So that, again, is a credit to you, Brother Lawrence, for the impact that you've had on individuals that you may not have even known and that were watching what you were doing. And these are times to where, just like in some of the instances that we have now, you have to have officers that step up and see what is going on and stop it. And the thing, while we're talking about being Black and blue, we're not trying to make this a race issue, which some individuals are, because we have some outstanding white officers that work with us and are also into humanity. And it's kind of interesting because we're losing some white officers that would want to be in the profession that are good officers that don't want to be painted as racist. So what we're looking at is we're looking for overall outstanding individuals that want to serve our community the way that they should. But just tonight, we're talking about what it is to be Black and blue. Okay. So now I know we talked about it also. What is it we had? I'm just looking at some of these conversations. I see Judge Alana Holmes, excellent observation. Self-policing in any profession is suspect. Police oversight panels might be the way to go. This is kind of interesting because what the police oversight panels are, it depends on where they are, how they're set up, and what generally is their purpose. Some have subpoena power, some have limited power, some get the cases after they've been resolved, some are actually involved in it. But this is what we look at when we talk about community-oriented policing and engaging the community. We're wanting the community to be engaged with the police department. Police department should be engaged with their communities because each community is going to want something different. And when you look at it, we're talking about training. People always talk about training. let's think about it. Like Selena, as you shared with us the instance with you in the police academy, think about what it is when you're going through training and you're in the police academy. When you're in the police academy, you're doing whatever you have to do that those instructors tell you to do so that you can get out and graduate the academy. When you get on your field training officer, they tell you best get along with your field training officer because they basically hold your careers in your hand. Do either of you all that are on the panel want to discuss your experiences either in the academy or while you were going through the field training officer program?
If I may, I just want everybody, I know Selena had some issues in the academy. She's going to elaborate on that. But I can tell you that while I was in the academy, I didn't experience any issues. So just so that you know, every person that goes through the academy do not have any issues, and they can get through the academy without any problem. I didn't have any academy. I didn't have any problem in the academy. I didn't have any problem going through my stages as well. So I had it was pretty easy for me. So Selena.
Thanks for clarifying, because we don't want to make it seem like everybody had an issue. And then sometimes, you know, it's kind of like that prayer says, danger seen and unseen. Some things are happening we didn't know were happening on both sides, good and bad. So a lot of times you had those people that were helping you and some that were hurting you. So I appreciate you pointing that out, Madam President.
So when I had that initial experience with the instructor, you know, calling me out, you know, why are you here? Or how did you get here? Actually, that was my only issue that I did have in the academy. And as a matter of fact, the other recruits, my classmates, were more offended. I was offended, but they were just as offended that I was singled out by that particular instructor. And they complained to the academy. And so they had to address the issue with the instructor. So, but I always felt, even in the academy, going through that situation, and I'm sure some others can relate to me, being Black and being a female, that I had to always work 10 times as harder than my counterparts. And I still feel the same way. You know, I want to always be successful, always make my family and my friends proud. So that's something within me that I knew that I had to, you know, work just as hard, if not harder than everybody else.
Well, if I may, I totally agree with Selena when she says that I've always felt is that I had to work hard as well. And I'm going to say that maybe I didn't have a problem in the academy, because when people see me and interact with me, they say I have this way about me that I can almost be, I guess, almost unapproachable because the way my demeanor is. So maybe I didn't have those issues because of the way that I look or I appear to some people, or what the perception of me was of them. And the role that I'm in now, speaking of having to work 10 times hard and being a female, I am the highest ranking female in my department. So imagine that. And when I'm sitting at the table, I'm sitting at the table with men. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes trying to find my voice in that table. You know, being a female, being in uniform, you know, being blue. And then also too, I look at it as sometimes they don't see me, or they don't want to see me because I'm blind. And that's just my perception. So I do have to work hard. So I definitely feel the same way that Selena feels, that I have to work 10 times as hard as my counterparts, whether they're male or female.
Okay, outstanding. And just one thing with Atina, you have something? Go ahead, Atina.
Yeah, I was going to say that I didn't have an issue in the police academy. The police academy went fairly smooth for me. It was not until I got to FTO that I did have a slight issue. And I don't know why. I had 2 FTOs, and my first FTO was a white male, and he was great. Had no issues with him, but he would not allow me to eat in his car. But early on, after my in-house training, we had a white female FTO, and apparently there was just this, I suppose, bet going around the agency that I was not going to make it. There hadn't been a Black female officer hired for many years. And it was almost like a bet to see, because people believed that I would fail. And so I'm pretty sure it was purposefully that she became my FTO. And, you know, the message that she sent around was that she was, you know, patiently awaiting for me to become her trainee. And I think that there was something in place where they wanted me to fail. And it took her black supervisor to call her in to, you know, put that issue to rest before I became her trainee. And I remember my very first 2 minutes in her police car, the conversation was, you know, I want us to start from scratch and to, you know, clear the air. And from my perspective, I'm like, I don't even know who you are. So what air needs to be cleared? So that let me know that there was obviously something that had transpired. But this is something that occurs with probably Black males, many Black women. And so I made it through FTO, but had it not been for that Black supervisor who had heard these things throughout the agency to call her in and say, you need to put a rest to this, then I don't know what my future would be. And I didn't even know this woman.
Thank you for sharing that. And I see Zimbler Chalk just posed something. He says, all this is nice, but we have Black executives who are afraid to make a decision on hiring more Blacks. Black chiefs won't work hard to hire Black officers. They get up there and get scared. Well, I'm not a chief.
Well, I'm an assistant director, and I can sure tell you I am not afraid to hire Blacks. Not at all. If there's an issue, I mean, if I have to fight to get a Black recruit in a class because something came up, I would do that. I would look into it to find out exactly what transpired, what happened, and what's causing them not to go into a class. I am not one of them individuals that sit by and let things happen. I call things out. I call a spade, and I'm not unapologetic about it.
Okay. Mr. Lawrence, go ahead, Selena.
So another issue is,
Selena, if you could let Ms. Lawrence, go ahead, Ms. Lawrence.
Because I can't hear any of the other panelists. I can't hear anything that they're saying. But I heard you a couple things, and I'm reading a couple things here about Black officers who are talking about other Black officers getting on them or badgering them about speaking out against systemic racism. And I would say to you, let them speak out. Let them say whatever they want to say. Because see, sooner or later, they're going to realize that they're the same boat that everybody else is in when it comes down to the nitty-gritty. They're no different. They can think they are, but they're no different. They're going to be treated the same way, and they need to understand that. The other thing, if I may, right quick, I think that. Hold on a second. I think that we as an organization can continue to do the things that we do to try to help, particularly young African Americans who are on departments, to not be afraid of coming to the organization and talking about things. And don't try to fight the battle on your own. Fight the battle in numbers. And come to the organization and let the organization determine the strategic way of fighting the battles and dealing with people who tend to think that everything's groovy when it's not.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Liney. What I would like to do as we're going toward the next thing, I want to just flip this a little bit because we've talked about challenges about being law enforcement officers, about being Black and blue. We're having a lot of our officers right now dealing with the George Floyd protests and how they're actually dealing with them out there in the front lines when many times we understand the struggle that the Blacks are going through. What I'd like to do now is talk about your why you became a law enforcement officer and some of your most rewarding times that you have had being Black and blue. I'll go ahead and start off with you, Madam President.
My rewarding time, I would say helping the community. I'm an advocate for kids. I've been a school resource officer during my career. I've been part of the community-oriented policing part of my career. So anytime where I'm interacting and helping kids, helping them to find themselves, to realize their potential and their dreams, and to keep them on the right track is very, very fulfilling for me. Anything that we have in my department deals with kids, I try to make myself a part of it, just so that I can make an impact on their lives. So anything dealing with kids, I'm there. So my most rewarding time would be me helping kids get through and be a mentor for them.
Okay, great. Okay, Ms. Lonnie, let me see if I can get your voice up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
The question was why
get into
get
law
into law
enforcement?
enforcement?
Yes, and tell us some of your most rewarding times.
Well, I actually, believe it or not,
I got
into two reasons.
One,
One,
growing up over town, there were a couple of people who were involved in law enforcement. Mr. Leroy Smith and some other folk who were involved. Robert Ingram. I got to know them and had an appreciation for how they were in the community. And the
second thing that happened was that it was really on a whim taken early out from the Marine Corps because they were doing specials to get people involved in law enforcement, and I decided to try my luck at it and got hired by MDPD. I think rewarding. Wow. I think rewarding, believe it or not, was when I served as the president of the Progressive Officers Club, and we won the lawsuit against the county. That was rewarding. And there are a number of instances in terms of helping people, doing things in the community and being involved. Those were the rewarding times. And there were a lot of those, because not everything that you did was, people think everything you did was negative.
Okay, great. Who's next to share their why and some of the most rewarding times being a law enforcement officer, being Black and blue?
I will. So honestly, it was never my intent on being a police officer. I actually wanted to be a news reporter, a newscaster. And so after I graduated from high school, I wasn't able to go away to college just because of financial issues. And so my best friend then, Cora Days, Cora, if you're on, I credit you this. She told me about the position for the community service officer with Hollandale Beach. So that's how my law enforcement career started, because I was a college student and I know I wanted a job. I was always told, get a government job with good benefits. So when the opportunity became available, I applied for this government job and I was hired by Hollandale Police Department. And then years later, I became a police officer. So I just figured that's what God wanted for me. Not knowing then that it would be a very rewarding career. And some of what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Was really your why and then your most rewarding experience.
my most rewarding experience is just, if you guys don't already know, I love youth. It's just being involved in community events, the engagement with the community, specifically youth, and just being able to show the community, being able to show society that there's a more of a good side to police than what they see in the media. You know, that we are human and that we care about our community, and we care about the people within our community, and we care about the youth. So just to have kids run up to me and want to hug me and know about my job, I think that's the most rewarding part, just seeing the smiles on people's faces.
Okay. All right. Atina?
I never thought I was going to be a police officer. I knew I wanted to work in the criminal justice system. My father was murdered when I was 12. And so my senior year of college, I was curious and I did my own little detective research because I didn't really know everything that happened. And so that led me to enjoy investigations, which brought me to law enforcement. But I didn't think that I would work in local law enforcement. I really wanted to be an attorney, but I stuck around and stayed here. And so the best part about my job, I love doing investigations because, as we all know, in law enforcement, investigations can mean everything or the lack thereof. So I liked, the aspect of working in investigation, and especially when I became a sergeant, to teach officers what probable cause is, how you handle cases, how you handle investigations to form a conclusion. The biggest thing I liked about investigations is, our job is just to be a fact finder. Whether you exonerate or implicate whoever you suspect did something. So I love that part of working in law enforcement. And I also love the community aspect because far too often police officers think they're very different than the very people that they serve, and we're really not much different from each other. So I love giving back, and kids love cops. Most young kids love cops. And so being able to impact them and mentor them, develop them, do things in the community, whether it's backpack giveaways or whatever it is. That's why I work in law enforcement and why I enjoyed it.
Okay, and personally, I like to say that my life motto is, if I can help somebody as I pass along the way, my living will not be in vain, by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I must say, it took me a long time to put in my application with Fort Lauderdale Police Department. I must thank Zimbalist Chalk, fraternity brother, because we have to look at it. It's your network that really is your net worth, and who you are really associating with will expose you to things that you never really knew about. Many of us don't know about the rewarding aspects of law enforcement, and most of us only know about law enforcement second and third hand. But he knew that I wanted to impact the community. He says, what other job can you have to positively impact the community other than law enforcement? So that's what I love. So I've been in law enforcement. I've done the bike patrol before it was sexy. I've taught DARE. I've worked now, and as a major, I'm over our community engagement team. And I'll say my most rewarding times was working with the DARE program after working with all of those. And now some of my DARE kids are 32, 33 years old, and seeing them in the community and them still remembering what we talked about in DARE. And just on this panel here, having taught Atina in the police academy and being able to have those discussions with her and kind of coach and mentor. And I want you all to know, a lot of times when you're looking at the law enforcement career, there are individuals that are wearing our badge that do not need to be wearing the badge. And we're also looking at it that there need to be more representation in our profession of Black and brown individuals, because we do bring a different perspective to the field. We help bring a different level of cultural competence to law enforcement, because a lot of people are unaware of how to even deal with our urban environment, how to deal with people. And this is what we bring to the table. So while we like to talk about the trials and tribulations, there are definitely a lot of rewards. Are there anything that anybody would like to add in here that our audience might need to know? Because we're always talking about things that have happened, but let's talk about next steps. What can we do to move our profession and the community forward next? Who would like to start?
Can I say something?
Yes, Selena.
In speaking to other law enforcement, other noble members, I'm finding that even after the George Floyd incident, that some, not all, some police executives haven't taken the time to even reach out and speak to and address their Black officers. But what they're doing is they're going out in the community, engaging the community, talking about what their plans are, talking about all the programs that they're doing. And I think what needs to happen is, and even though it may be uncomfortable, police chiefs need to be having conversations with their Black law enforcement officers, and that's not happening. How are you going to go and speak to the community about different things, and you're not even taking the time to reach out to your officers and speak to your officers?
Okay, great. And as we're taking these questions, if there's any questions or comments or issues that you all would like to hear us address, please just type them in the comment section. If you're enjoying the conversation, just give the little reply, do the smiley faces, the thumbs up, the hearts, if this is something that you are enjoying. Be sure to like our page there with the South Florida, Noble South Florida chapter, so you can see what it is that we're doing and can stay engaged in this conversation, because this is a community effort. We need to be working together as a community and law enforcement to move our society forward. Okay, who will be next to talk about what our next step should be?
I think our next step needs to be a couple things. And one of them is that law enforcement needs to be transparent. We need to be open and transparent with the community. We need to stop acting as though we know what the community wants and need without engaging them in conversation. It is, the community know what they need. The thing is that we're not out there asking them. We're not out there getting their input. We need to engage our youth. We need to find out what they want and what they need. We need to have conversations on a daily basis with them as often as we want. And we need to get out our cars. We need to start getting to know our community. Most law enforcement departments have take-home cars, right? So we don't get out our cars anymore. We don't walk and get to know our community, the community in which we serve. We need to get back to basic. We need to have the officer friendly at the school so that the young kids can know law enforcement way before we have a negative encounter with them. Or what I mean by negative encounter, meaning that we respond to their home for a call or something. But we need to be more transparent. We need to get out there and do more things like we did back in the day, so that the community can see us as being human, and then they can start trusting us again.
Okay, all righty, Atina.
Much of what these two ladies just said, community is definitely important. It's important for Black chiefs and chiefs, period, to talk to your employees, all of them. The fact that there are so many police chiefs that haven't even released statements to their employees internally is appalling. But many of them have graced the steps of City Hall, and they give statements to the media, and they've done forums on Zoom and all of these other platforms, but they're not talking to their employees. It's really disgusting. Something else that we need to do, we definitely need to get more involved with our community. We need to get better hiring practices. We need to get away from these cookie cutter applications and oral boards where you ask the same person the same 8 or 10 questions and they pass or fail. We need to really dig into a person's character, because the people that you hire are the people that are serving the community. And if you don't really know who they are, then how do you know that they're a good fit? And you don't have to be Black to serve a Black community, but you definitely should have some life experience, some good intentions, something that you've proven and showed as to why you want to work in some of these communities. Some communities are more Black than others, so you really just don't know. But we need to get better hiring practices. We need to be more inclusive. We need to be recruiting Black people to be police officers, not just in Black communities, just period. And so these chiefs, wherever they are, whoever they are, they need to be looking at their hiring practices. We know that there is a disparity in law enforcement in terms of Black people that serve in law enforcement. But what are we doing to combat that? Are we going to HBCUs? You know, I know of white police officers that have minor misdemeanor arrests. Are Black people being disqualified for those same reasons where our white counterparts are being hired? So, and when Black people are disqualified, we should have like very specific reasons should be given to these hiring boards or whoever is in the process or in charge of hiring candidates. So far too often we see that people are just disqualified or they don't make it to the next step, but why? What's the reason? So until we develop ways where we are putting Black people in our communities that are maybe more like-minded or are from that area and they understand our culture, our background, some of the things that we've been through, I think that we will continue to spin our wheels.
Can I just also add in regard to personnel and recruitment, you need to also consider, is that specific unit diversified? Do you have Black, Hispanic officers doing backgrounds assigned to that unit to recruit minorities? Some personnel units don't even have any minorities within that particular unit to do that. So that's an issue in itself when the whole entire unit is white.
Now, Flynn, you talked about diversity. Now we have to make sure that just because we have, in particular, let's say that unit that hires personnel, that hires individuals, just because that unit can be diverse, does not mean that that person who's in that unit that is Black or brown can have any decision making. So we got to be very careful about just saying that we need to make a particular police department diverse or a particular squad or unit diverse. When we talk about diversity, we need to make sure that there's inclusion in that diversity, because just having a Black or brown person a part of a unit or a section don't mean anything if he or she is not going to have any type of input on making sure that what you're bringing in, you're getting the quality as well as the diversity where they're going to have some input. So we got to be mindful of that. Let's not just talk about diversity. Let's talk about inclusion with the diversity.
I greatly appreciate how you have stated that, because sometimes people look at diversity as what it's going to look like when they walk inside your precinct and they see the pictures on the wall, say, "Ooh, we got some Blacks, some browns, and some whites." But as Selena mentioned, you got a lot of, as Martina mentioned, you have a lot of Blacks, but it's a whole lot of different kind of Blacks, because you got Blacks from Alabama, Blacks from California, New York, and from the islands in Europe, and it's all a different experience. But it's like you say, Madam Director, if you have the diversity in there and you're giving them voice, when we go back to procedural justice, the 4 tenets of that, you have to give them voice, which means you're listening to what they say. You have to be transparent to really discuss what is actually happening. There has to be some sense of fairness and impartiality. So that procedural justice, many times when we teach it, we're talking about from our agency to the community, but we also have to make sure our agency within the agency is procedurally just. If someone didn't go to a unit, are you hearing their voice? Are you transparent? And is the procedure fair? When you're talking about promotions, if someone didn't get a promotion, is the procedure fair? And as we discussed in procedural justice, it's kind of like the individual that did not get a ticket, but they were berated so much by the police officer, they would have rather get the ticket. And the police officer was like, "Well, you didn't get a ticket, but you berated me." So it's not the outcome that happened, it's how you did it. Does your means justify the end? So we like that. So I appreciate these, and I know that we're wrapping up on our hour here. And what I'd like to do, if I wanted to have a closing comment from everybody to everyone that's out here, we're having some things going. It seems like our audience is enjoying the conversation. We're getting some good feedback. We're talking about different things that are out there. And as we go back and look at the comments, I encourage everyone to write your comments in there. We'll go back as an organization, as individuals, take a look at the comments, reply to those, and have some things so that we can have a feedback. And if you want us to come back, please connect with the Noble South Florida chapter there on social media. Let us know what it is that you need for a community, because this is what we're out here doing. Let's have a few closing words from everybody that are here. Go ahead.
Let me just pose one question, Dr. Salters. I see a few people that have raised the question, how do you report bad officers? So,
okay, I'm gonna give you my blanket statement on reporting a bad officer. And we always talk about the negative, but let's also talk about the good, because when good officers are recognized, and that begins to see what they will do. The way that you would report anything at any agency, and I'm one that believes in audit trails. If you know an officer is doing good or bad, email the chief or the sheriff. They will figure out and let it flow downhill to where it needs to go. Because so many times we get caught up, well, I forget who's in that position or that position. You send it to the department head and they will determine where it needs to go from there. And you will have your audit trail right there with what we need to do. Okay. All right. We just had one question pop up. Says, how do you feel about engaging a diverse group of community members in review of police use of force policies? Now with that, it depends on which part of the review process are you in, because some of them are in at the end, some of them are in the middle. And that's one of those things where you have to have a true engagement of the community and the police department to determine what that would look like. Anyone else want to discuss that? Okay. All right. So on that one, let's go over there and let's have a few closing words so that I can respect everyone's time. Anything to close out, to kind of sum up and close out and kind of put it away and what we should do to move forward, because I want everybody that is listening to this, I want you to get in contact with your local police department. I want you to make sure you filled out your census, because your census is going to help determine the amount of resources that your police department is going to have. And when you're talking about defunding, make sure you understand what the term defunding means. I believe it would be more appropriate to say a reallocation of funds, and that would be determined on each community level. So don't get caught up with slogans, find out what it actually means. And many police departments have already been reallocating funds. Get engaged, make sure you fill your census out, make sure you are a registered voter, make sure you vote, because those are also going to impact those local issues. Go ahead, any of their closing out comments?
You summed it up, Dr. Salter.
Wait, I hear Mr. Liney came back through.
Yeah, I came back through. I just want to say, it's one thing to vote, but you got to stay involved in the process as it relates to the operation of your government. You can't vote and walk away. You can't vote and walk away and think that that everything is okay. You got to stay involved. Get involved with a lot of the departments I know have community advisory committees, and you should be able to know what those committees are. Get involved with them. Don't sit back and complain about it. Be about the business of being involved.
Outstanding. I appreciate your feedback on that and your years of service and what you continue doing down in Miami, and all of law enforcement is greatly appreciated, Mr. Lawrence. All righty. Thank you. Okay, who else has a few little closing words for us?
You want to go for it?
Yeah, sure, I'll go.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think and this is for specifically law enforcement. Even if you feel like you don't have a seat at the table or a voice within your department, I think it's very important to go outside your department, and continue the dialogue and continue to talk to other law enforcement officers, whether it be Black, white, Spanish. Have that conversation, because in having these conversations, you're going to see that we have shared experiences, that we're going through the exact same thing. You may be an officer in Palm Beach County. Well, I'm in Broward County and I'm experiencing the exact same thing. So we need to continue to reach out to each other, encourage each other, and have the conversations. And keep talking about it and reaching out and get involved in Noble, because Noble, we're leading the way and we're doing some great things. And I just hope Madam President wouldn't mind in expanding on what we're currently doing as the South Florida chapter. I put on the spot, y'all.
No.
Okay, let's do this, Madam President. Why don't we do this? Madam President, why don't I let you have the last word? Atina, would you like to have one thing to say in closing? We'll let Madam President close us out tonight.
Absolutely. So the one thing I will say to close out is that Black officers need to do more and be better. So sometimes we have Black officers that look at leadership roles as a challenge because they don't want the headache. It has to be a headache because if we don't do it, then somebody else that you may not like will be doing it. It is definitely a headache. It's a responsibility. It's like having children. So if you can be a parent, you can be a supervisor, get involved, take those exams, get promoted, and put yourselves in a position to have a seat at the table.
And then also mentor others. Atina, that's very important. Mentorship and sponsorship.
We can't be crabs in a bucket. At some point, a transition has to take place and you have to set up a succession plan. White people do it all day long. They smoke cigars together, they go fishing together, they're riding their motorcycles together, they go to each other's houses. They do this on duty and off duty. And as Black supervisors, we're often hesitant to openly mentor people that look like us. Don't be afraid. The second thing that I will say for those people that don't work in law enforcement, hold your elected officials accountable. Hold your chiefs of police accountable. If they're not doing what you think they should be doing, go to those city hall chambers, because they all have open meetings, and let your voice be heard. Take your friends and your family, because ultimately the community is who pays us as public servants.
Okay, and Madam President, would you close out our evening for us?
Well, just to piggyback on what Atina said, we talk about, I think a lot of time we get complacent. We get very comfortable in our situations or in the units or the area that we are in. And I think that we need to stop being comfortable. If anyone out there who are in law enforcement right now, and if they are comfortable in their current situation, they need to move. They need to move. When you're comfortable, that means that you're not doing anything. You're not being effective. You need to be effective. You need to move, start looking. And also too, when talk about mentorship and talking about leaders reaching out and helping others, officers need not to be afraid to come to leaders, come to their Black leaders, come to their Black supervisors and ask for help. Because we don't know all the time if you need help. If we do know, we will come to you. Sometimes we don't know that, but don't be afraid to reach out to individuals that should be able to help you. The Noble South Florida chapter is doing a lot of things. And particularly right now, I can tell you that the South Florida chapter is reaching out and having conversations with the executives, the police executives across all three counties, Dade County, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade. And we're looking at how we can assist them to make effective change across South Florida. And when it comes to police using excessive force, when it comes to the institutional racism that exists in modern day policing, we're looking to work with them to make effective change. And we're not gonna be on the sideline anymore. We want them to do change, and we are not gonna stop until effective change is made. So just so that you know, we are having conversation with all the top police executives across Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, and Broward County, and we would keep our Noble members updated on what is going on with that. And I would like to thank everybody for coming on and participating and listening to what we had to say. We hope that you would join us on our future conversations regarding this. So again, thank you all.
Okay, I'm Dr. Gregory Salters.
Lastly, I'm sorry.
No
Thank
problem.
you, Dr. Major Gregory Salters, for facilitating this. It's very much needed discussion, and you didn't hesitate when we reached out to you. You didn't hesitate at all in agreeing to be part of this great discussion. So, you know, we're very thankful for you as well.
I greatly appreciate it. And for everyone out there, I am Dr. Gregory Salters, and we are the Noble South Florida chapter, moving our organization and our community forward. Please join us and stay tuned. If there's other things you want us to discuss, please type them in the comments, and we'll be sure to get with those and have those discussions when we can. Y'all have a good one, good night, and thank you for being with us.